So first item of business for the Asset and Investment Review Task Force is approval of the minutes from our prior meeting. Where's my agenda?
Sent an email last night.
Oh, okay. So,
Treasurer,
yes.
you may want to introduce the board members to ensure that, you have the majority here and, okay? Just
Okay,
for
great.
voting purposes and stuff.
Okay.
Just the board members are fine.
Okay, that sounds good. I am Marlo Oak, State Treasurer and Chair of the task force.
Why don't you just go through the easiest way to probably do the task force members is a roll call based on you have the first page of the report here.
Oh, I purposely didn't print one off. I was trying to save a tree.
Pull that up for you.
Okay.
Or I can read it off. Sorry, we're a little disorganized.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead if you want to read those. As soon as you get that.
Okay, so we have Treasurer Oakes, Auditor Cannon. I believe Senator Stratton is on. Yes, I see Senator Stratton.
Great.
Representative Peterson. I don't know that I see him. Daniel Gardner, we do have him. Howard Headley is here. Rusty Cannon. Don't believe I see Rusty on.
Rusty's not going to be able to make it.
Okay, thank you. Billy Hesterman. I see Billy on.
Here.
Billy. Okay. Paul Brown. Paul on.
Don't see Paul.
Don't see Paul. Kim Jackson is on, I believe. Yes.
Yep.
Kim, you're there.
Here.
LeGrand Bitter. Do we have LeGrand on?
Yes, I'm here.
Our advisory task force members, Scott Jones, I do not believe is on, and we have Todd. Todd, you are on, correct?
Here.
So we have, yeah, we've got a quorum. 7 of total. So, okay, great. Any questions on the minutes? If there are none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item is what?
That's the report.
Okay, so I assume all of you have received the report. We've had some excellent feedback come in from many folks on this task force, so thank you for that input. Let's see. I guess
I sent out the most recent version incorporating.
Okay, thank you.
Most of the edits are a couple of charts that need to be updated per some recommendations from the auditor's office. But that shouldn't change the analysis, I don't believe. So we'll just need to make a couple of updates there, but I think we have all of the other feedback considered and incorporated.
Okay. Yeah, I guess what's the best way to proceed at this point? Because people probably haven't had a chance to review the latest. I haven't. Is there anybody that hasn't sent in comments that wanted to provide feedback here?
I have one thing that I'll throw out there, and realizing that this might be a little outside of the scope, but I'm great with the transparency elements that we've talked about. I am supportive of what we've talked about and making sure that the money, is somehow funneled back into our economy in at least studying it and doing, some type of piloting it. I'm wondering about the are we providing some kind of incentive for government to save this money and then invest it instead of getting it back to the taxpayers somehow? And so I'm wondering if there is some type of discussion or recommendation to make on perhaps the revenue made from the investments goes into the calculation of the certified rate for the entities on their property tax, and that the rate drops down just a little bit lower to account for the money made here. So then there is some type of, the benefit to the actual taxpayers in this. I think then it at least doesn't provide the incentive to save everything. Like if you need to have reserves, you need to have reserves. And I think that's totally appropriate, but also it doesn't uh, provide an incentive to say, well, we want you to do this so that you can grow government without having the taxpayers involved.
Yeah. So the so is that a policy recommendation?
I think, yeah, that would be a policy recommendation. It'd have to be a bill, but it would be something to say, revenue made from the investments would be go into the calculation of the certified rate, if I'm saying that right. Some of my other former taxpayer nerds on the line maybe want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly, but that's something I've thought about as we've gone through these meetings, and I've wanted to um, realize I should have shared it sooner, but sharing it now just as a last point of feedback.
I can support that. I think it's a difficult policy recommendation, but I'm glad you brought it up because that's the part that haunts me through this whole thing um, as a tax professional, because I do realize that money that is collected by government in the form of taxation is by its nature removing it from the economy. And this buildup in reserves tells me that we have taken that money and then built an excess reserve, which could be working in the economy had we left it there. But I guess I would move more towards a recommendation that entities return to a pre-COVID level of savings. And I do think that the way this is structured at this point in time, part of my worry about the recommendations for the policy change is what happens if these governments return to a more normal level of reserves. If we've given an option for an investment somewhere else and that investment gets pulled back because of that return to normal, have we set it up to make it a negative consequence to a bank who took that deposit to then have it held back? But overall, where I feel like we're short on the recommendations is the recognition that leaving the money with the taxpayer would have improved the economy and probably would have increased the deposits in banks through the local taxpayer leaving it in their bank.
Thank you. I agree. That's a great point, and that's really at the core of what we're talking about here.
Mhm. That's great.
I think that's a recommendation we can easily incorporate and then send back out to this group for feedback unless there's any other conversation. What exactly that looks like.
I mean, that
So
gets to the heart, Billy, that gets to the heart of what we're talking about. I mean, if including that in the certified property tax rate calculation lowers property taxes, that's going to go into people's pockets. That's going to go into their bank and credit union accounts. I mean, so one way or another, that money gets back into the local economy. And I really think what the University of Chicago report suggests, if we can ensure that this money gets deployed, here locally, the yield is better for everybody.
Well, and that's the much more efficient way of doing this, right?
Yep.
So, thank you for that.
Because we are accounting nerds, Marlo, we figured out that based on the PTIF values today, that is $10,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state of Utah. Just
Nice.
FYI.
That's awesome.
Wow.
One unintended consequence I wouldn't like to see is, yeah, let's go ahead and return. Let's increase taxes and spend more. We get the levels down to increase taxes. So I think we return to pre-COVID without an increase in tax, but a decrease in tax would be the nuance that I'd like to hear what your feedback would be on. If that makes sense.
Did anybody catch that?
I couldn't quite understand.
It was close. I almost caught it, but can you repeat that?
You were a little bit muffled.
All right, let me try again. Hopefully this will work. What I don't want to do is say, let's go back to pre-COVID, and so we're going to spend the money, grow government, and then increase taxes. Does that make sense? Did you catch it there?
Yeah, in other words, you don't want to cut taxes and then seeing increased growth in government, so you have to increase taxes.
Well, no, the notion is let's
Sounds like he's saying spend it or lose it.
let me get in a better place and I'll comment in a minute. Thanks.
Marlo, I have just a question, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not sure, we're talking about political subdivisions broadly. When I look at districts specifically, we have districts such as water districts, sewer districts, and others that have substantial capital infrastructure. And they're in the statute over the years, a situation or a framework has been created that allows a district to have 1 year's accumulation of operating funds in order to have somewhat of a rainy day fund. That seems to me to be wise and reasonable. In addition to that, the question is, do we do O&M? Do we maintain our facilities? There's a situation a number of years ago where a particular city wanted to have a district take over their sewer operations because it was costing them a lot of money. The district looked at it and declined. The reason why was that the district had been diligent continually in maintaining their infrastructure. The city had not. Funds had been moved around to other areas for Peter to pay Paul, and it was in bad shape, and the district citizens didn't want to take on the burden of paying millions of dollars to pay for the lack of maintenance on the part of this other entity. So the point of sharing that experience is, in large part, districts plan wisely in the long run over the space of 10 or 20 years on doing maintenance, ongoing maintenance and replacement of their existing facilities, as well as long-term development, which may go about 30 to 50 years. And it's wise, it seems, not necessarily to wait until you get to the edge of the cliff and have no reserves, and you go out to the bonding markets not knowing what the market is going to be like at that point in time. And regardless of what the market is, then you've got to go out and raise taxes in order to pay for the general obligation bond. So I can see, I understand the discussion that's going on, but I guess my point is, there are political subdivisions in the state that are accumulating reserves, I believe, in a responsible fashion in order to address ongoing O&M and capital intensive operations that are critical to the health and safety of the citizens, as well as capital development as we move ahead. I think if we look at the reserve balances with various districts, there'll be some very large districts that may be getting into some larger balances, but I don't think any of them equate to some of the ones that have been pointed out over the past several months in certain other areas of political subdivisions. So I just want to mention that. I don't know if we are pre-COVID. I don't know what effect that's going to have on this type of long-term planning and responsible O&M and capital development, but I just wanted to make that point that there may be something more to consider.
Thank you.
Look, Rand, can I ask you a question? Just because I think you're making a good point, and I don't think we've gotten into that in this task force, because I think, in fact, I think that's what we're saying is we don't want to opine on every entity and what they're doing with their reserves. I think the fact that we have better transparency and people can look is a healthy thing.
Yes.
They can compare, and these folks can make those kind of arguments. I think what we're asking is the yield on those reserves should benefit who? And what Billy's suggesting is that ultimately they're taxpayer monies that have been collected and held on to, most likely for prudent reasons. But to the until if we were to take the yield and use it as part of the certified property tax rate calculation, then it removes any incentive to grow that reserve any bigger than it needs to be. It doesn't create a punishment for building them in the first place. So you can build a reserve you need, but you're not going to be punished for doing it. But you won't have an incentive to do it to get a yield, or to make them bigger to get a yield, because it'll just go back to the taxpayers through the certified property tax rate calculation. And so that kind of addresses all the questions that we haven't been able to answer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. With respect to an entity that may be funding for long-term maintenance and development and capital and ongoing maintenance, obviously those earnings would increase the funds that are available for that purpose. So in that respect, it would go back to the citizens because they don't have to pay for it. And in that respect as well, those types of funds obviously are paying contractors and other types of companies, engineers and others, where the money does go directly back into the economy.
And I get that, and I don't want to hamper an entity's ability to have reserves and to be fiscally sound and smart for the future and make sure that they're able to operate the way that we expect them to. I think I just am saying in the calculation, let's just say whatever, it might be $100. I don't know. It might be 10, 100,000 though. And that just goes into that calculation of the rate to bring it down or to adjust it correctly when that certified rate is set. And I hope that wouldn't impact any of your districts, LeGrand, negative or positive. I hope it would be a neutral move.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to take a look at it and see what the impact might be. That'd be fine. And at the same time, it might be helpful to look at the advertisements and the truth in taxation, because really it's in some respects it's not completely transparent and accurate. And we can, if it'd be nice to have some discussions on that as we move ahead as well, and have more information for the citizens to give a little more clarity on exactly what is happening. I think that would be helpful.
Kim.
Yeah, I double checked, and investment returns is not part of the calculation. Just so we all understand. And my question is, the returns on investment, they go back into the entities and offset expenses or provide additional revenue that would perhaps delay a tax increase down the road. So I think there is some effect already in benefiting the taxpayer based on investment returns. So
So
I guess-
Kim, I would say that you're right, but only if the tax increase doesn't happen. If the money is actually spent in lieu of growing the fund, does it stop the increase from the tax increase from happening? And there isn't anything in that statute that says you can't grow beyond a certain point. And I think incorporating it is an interesting way of keeping that in check. It may be broad enough so that we're catching all of it in one fell swoop. I think it's an interesting suggestion. I appreciate Billy bringing it up because it's actually a way to address it in a global fashion over all of the entities in with one policy.
Yeah, and I guess a question would be is, do we believe that certain entities are just trying to grow their reserves as big as they can to get the, as big a return as they possibly can? I know that's would be an interesting discussion and would be hard to measure for sure. But
Well, and that's kind of the point. I wouldn't feel comfortable engaging in that in a broad, I think every entity is different, it's like, and they all have to be accountable to their constituencies. And I think that's a good process. The transparency will help in that. But if you remove the incentive, then we remove all doubt. It's like, well, nobody's doing that because it doesn't inure any benefit. So I think we can say with certainty that if they have a reserve, that must be what they need.
I didn't want to
But
throw us off this long, but that was just one item that I'm glad we've had this discussion about it.
Yeah, I think it's a very good discussion, so thank you for bringing that up.
Unless there's any opposition, I can draft that up and add that as a recommendation in the report.
Well, as I was looking at, you just send out, and I appreciate you sending out the report last week. Apologize, I did, I was late getting my comments in, but what I realized as I was going through the comments, Marlo, is that I don't know that maybe what this report needs to look like is just kind of a listing of the different themes in a report to the legislators. It may not be that we can all agree on one big recommendation, because I'm guessing the local entities are gonna wouldn't necessarily be excited about that policy being included in this report as part of our recommendations, unless we're gonna have like a vote count on each recommendation. This passed 9-7, or this recommendation passed, does that make sense?
Yeah. I
Because
mean,
I'm guessing there's some things in here that I'm not gonna vote for.
I love the whole thing, Howard, I guarantee it.
Well, there's like, we can talk about this, we get into it, penalties and clawbacks. I'm just like, no one's gonna take a deposit if there's a potential penalty rate if they don't, that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of details that would still have to be discussed, I think, no matter which way this goes. So is that doable, like a table of?
Like who's agrees on?
No. Just here are the things that were discussed, right? All of these different.
Which I think we've done that, but we explicitly outlined some recommendations in part because that's what the statute asks us to do, to make recommendations on policy.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
And I think that, and maybe we add a clause in there that not everything that was discussed in this report was agreed upon by all members.
Or
I
say,
think-
here's
or-
a counter.
Yeah, include the counter in the recommendations.
Yeah.
But I think ideally the recommendations themselves hopefully can be agreed upon. If there's anything in the recommendations that anybody has issues with, hopefully we can address them or at least include the counter argument in the recommendations themselves.
Mhm.
Well, and I'm just reading through them again, so that's my only concern. I don't know, what's the time frame do we have to?
Friday is when we need to submit it. It's the new deadline that we gave ourselves.
What page are our recommendation?
Yeah.
Marlo,
Yes, please.
LeGrand, I anticipate the way I kind of see this, I guess, is that there's a report that will be going to legislators as to recommendations on this broad study. And that if there's legislation that results, that the development of the fine points of that legislation would be an opportunity for parties to comment on the impact of that specific policy. In other words, I guess acknowledging that we have not sat down with the 400 districts in the state of Utah to discuss the potential impact of some of these things. Some of these suggestions are pretty broad, and which is fine. But I guess what I'm suggesting is once it boils down to some specific policy recommendations in statute, I would anticipate that feedback would be helpful, both positive and areas where a proposed policy might have some negative impacts and have some discussion on that.
Yeah.
Would that be a correct assumption on my part?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think that we can add a sentence or two in the report to allude to that. We, expect there to be broader discussion around any actual policy that we're going to come from
Yeah.
these recommendations.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's fine. I just I think it's wise as we're cooking the meal that we make adjustments to make sure it ends up where we really need to be in all areas, both on the point of this whole discussion evaluation and making certain that we also don't damage the ability of any type of political subdivision to effectively provide services to their citizens. And
Yeah.
and I mean that honestly, that effectively providing that service to make sure it doesn't damage that ability to efficiently and effectively provide those services. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's great. Kim.
Yeah, I want to say amen to that. I think this has been a bit of a struggle for me from the county's perspective and the local entities. I just don't, I'm not sure what the vehicle would be for local entities to do this. And so I'm happy that we're doing a pilot program on the state level using those funds, because I think it would be a struggle, and I think we'd probably have to rewrite the Money Management Act to allow local entities to provide any substantial source of money, because right now we're limited to basically CDs that are, federally insured. So I'm not sure exactly how local entities would go about doing this, and it's just a struggle, but I appreciate the broadness of the report. I think it's good. And I agree with LeGrand that we ought to put it forth to the legislature and then see what they come back with, and then have further discussion on, any bills that might be presented as a result of this task force. So just some thoughts.
Mhm. Thank you. Let's see. Any other
I think
feedback?
maybe given that feedback, Marla,
Mhm.
it may be helpful to go recommendation by recommendation. But the task force recommendations are at the end of the report. Let me pull it up so I can give specific page numbers. They begin at the very bottom of page 29 and go through 31, the end of the report.
Okay, do you want to take us through those?
Or I can walk us through those. So
Before you do that, Can you understand me a little bit better?
Yes.
Yeah,
My point I was trying to make earlier is just we need to talk through unintended consequences of potential unintended consequences of recommendations. And I appreciate the brain trust certainly that's here. I'm just trying to make that point.
No, that's great. That's a
I
really
think
important point.
I would, an unintended consequence may be if we're going to go to pre-COVID levels of reserves is we're going to maybe make some unwise expenditures and potentially, I'm not suggesting that would be the case, but we just need to be careful. We're not creating those unintended consequences, increasing the likelihood of them. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. That's perfect.
and I've shared my screen so that we can all see these as we're walking through the recommendations, item by item. So the first was to continue to uphold Utah's fiduciary framework for public funds. I don't know if you want me to read the entire paragraph.
Yeah, that's okay.
Or if there's any discussion around this item or any opposition specifically.
So what page are you on?
This is page 30.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I guess that takes into account the framework of the Money Management Act.
Statutory framework of the Money Management Act, which is
Now you can look.
And maybe we can just go through them, and then if we need to come back to one, we can. So the second is to support and sustain transparent Utah and the asset and investments data explorer. So again, allowing the auditor to continue to offer the services that they do so well in making this public information transparent and accessible and digestible.
I would just like to thank whoever put that in there because I thought it was Alex and he said it wasn't him. So that came from someone outside of the auditor's office, and I appreciate that support greatly. I am proud of the work we've done on this dashboard.
Yeah, it's been great having that dashboard available, like on demand. It's been really important. So,
Right.
yeah, it's been really helpful.
Report would not have been possible without the outstanding work of the auditor's office.
Yes, that is true.
So I threw that in there, but it was because this report would not have happened and the work we've done would not be possible without
That
the
data.
great work that the auditor has done
Yeah.
and her amazing staff.
Yeah. Thank you.
Amen.
Mr. Headley.
No, I was just gonna weigh in as well. I mean, that it's been very helpful. And I think the transparency piece of this is really one of the most enduring parts of, the refinement that was made. Although when I read the second paragraph there, I was just wondering, is there something else going on that we don't know about? Or is somebody proposing to uh, move Transparent Utah out from underneath the auditor's jurisdiction?
It is a constant discussion in the office, but the reason because it originally started under the legislative fiscal analyst, and then DGO took it, state finance took it, and then it came to the state auditor's office. But one of the reasons why it makes the most sense here is because of the independence. They aren't our numbers. They are other people's numbers that we verify. So it keeps the independence and the reliability there. But it is a constant discussion because not everyone loves that we show the data. So it always creates some interesting discussions if somebody doesn't like that we have shown their data.
Well, the only reason I raise it is that we really haven't talked about that in this task force. And so I don't know that I want to weigh in on that policy. I'm agnostic to it, but I I don't want to get in the crosshairs with somebody who does have strong feelings, because in honesty, we haven't really spent any time on that in the task force. So I probably think that second paragraph, including that in the task force report, might be, beyond the scope of what we've been doing. I think we've benefited from what the auditor has done, and I don't want to dispute that at all, but I don't want to get involved in a different political fight.
Unnecessary political fights.
I wouldn't say it's unnecessary either. I might get involved in it. It might be a very necessary political fight, but it's just not anything this task force has spent any time on.
I would just like to say one more time, we did not insert this in there, but I do appreciate the support. So it was an independent assessment, but
That's right.
So do you want the entire second paragraph removed, or is it really just, I'm wondering, the first portion about the auditor's constitutional authority, but continued modest investment, automation, data validation, and user interface improvements will help ensure, and you can read the rest of it, but
Or maybe we could just add some.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that it wasn't discussed in the task force, but the data that was
Well, we just discussed.
relied upon, well, now we discussed it. Does everybody agree? Should we make the auditor?
Yeah.
But
Brittany, I think you're on to it. If you just move the first sentence, then we're not engaged in that debate.
Mhm.
But continued investments in automation, data validation, all that, I think that, we're going to hit to keep this information current.
I can support them.
Yeah, okay. Good. Okay, number 3.
encourage continued refinement of D&I reporting and analytics. So as we've gone through this, we've uncovered some improvements that can be made to how we've collected that D&I data and then continue to analyze it. So that's something non-statutory, but that will continue to work in collaboration with the auditor's office on, and that's a direct result of the work of this task force.
right, and that would improve the analytics and reporting going forward if we had a better collection system on the D&I data that's coming in.
Yeah. Any concerns about that? Okay, number 4 is study regulatory constraints and private credit growth and explore market-based ways to strengthen local lending. And this is primarily an effort, as this is really non-statutory, but an effort that the state treasurer is undergoing to, again, support our local banking system. Any concerns about that?
No, I'll make a similar statement. We did not ask for you to put that in there, but we appreciate you doing it, given that those regulatory issues do impact the deployment of resources into the state. So.
Mhm. Number.
Okay, so moving on to 5, authorize a limited data-driven pilot on public deposits and local lending. And one of the changes that was included in the version that was sent out a few minutes before the meeting, but not in the others, was an increase of that cap to 300 million. It was originally 150 million. After talking with financial institutions, I think that 300 million is probably a more appropriate cap on that. Whether we've reached that amount is yet to be determined.
So
Though,
where would these state deposits come from?
Well,
That's to be determined.
That's to be determined.
We
They
haven't
have
figured
the
that.
state deposits. Yeah.
well,
Any concerns? Sorry, go
Yeah.
Howard.
I mean, obviously, I have strong feelings about what we recommend them doing. But um, so I'll retain the right to, object to the whole thing, but I'd love to improve it if I could. Um, the the one sentence in there about ensuring credible results, the pilot should require independent third-party data collection and analysis supported by an appropriation for one dedicated FTE. That seems extreme to me. And and then it talks about the state auditor and contract evaluator. I mean, again, so why the aversion to, and maybe doesn't want to do it, but why wouldn't this just be part of the Department of Financial Institutions? They already have the independence and the data gathering through the call report. And if we need to have supplemental data reported, the banks and the credit unions are going to feel most comfortable reporting that to their current regulator or a current regulator.
We have to do it anyway.
So I, Dan, is this you saying that we don't want to do it? I'll shut up if that's the case.
I didn't provide any input on that sentence. The department's happy to provide kind of reporting that we already get, and we're happy to customize call report data or anything like that. That's very easy for us, but I guess it depends what. I think the piece that we're not equipped to handle is studying like the economic benefit piece of it. So
this is where, again,
the outside of our expertise.
So again, we didn't ask for this to be in there, but one of the reasons I believe it's there is if the different reporting on the ACFR for the state, if it's going into a different, it would be a confirmation thing. So, but the full-time equivalent, when you take into consideration, like what Dan just said, over the complexity of studying a economic impact, I think personally, it's probably at least one full-time equivalent by the time you consider all of the oversight that would have to go in and the expertise that would need to be there to study an economic impact. This is something that's just never been measured by the reports back from TUR and Chicago. So I would hesitate, having done fiscal notes multiple times now, to undervalue the cost of what that oversight would be on a pilot program. Because we've done pilot programs through, I can think of two other entities that were pilots that have not been to this amount of money. The amount of money also adds the complexity, and the one full-time equivalent was with half of this amount at the top. So I would just put that caution in there. We don't need it to be in the state auditor's office. We have enough to do. So I'm happy for it to go over to the regulators or for a contract person at a university to have it, but I would hesitate to undervalue the cost of what that is going to look like.
No, I don't disagree. I don't think it can be done personally. I just don't see any way. We can't track a deposit into a specific loan, into any specific jobs that might be created or taxes that might be paid. We're going to lose that connection right at the beginning because no bank is going to track a deposit to a specific loan. So all we could reasonably do to satisfy the TUR report, which, in terms of, is this money getting lent in Utah, we can look at broad kind of ratio analysis and make sure that that bank is maintaining ratios of lending. I think that's what we have to take the trial period to perfect is, okay, how do we track this so we know these resources are being deployed into the Utah economy? And that's where I think Dan and the department's expertise is critical. So that's the most important first step. Is it deployed? The second issue that we're talking about is this broader economic proving out issue. And that's beyond my capacity to understand. It sounds, as you heard in my comments, I don't think it's possible. I think there's a reason no one's done it. And
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I don't think
Well-
it's going to be it's not going to be through precision. It's going to be more econometric analysis.
okay,
So
we could
that's where
just
you get
have-
into the higher level, expertise that would be needed to do that kind of analysis. And it's not going to be perfect. I mean, we know
No.
that.
Okay,
I
so
think Mark was going to say something.
as long as that's good. Okay, Mark, sorry.
Oh, no, I just want to apologize. Was coming in from DC today and my flight was delayed because anything from our federal government is not really working that well these days. But what I was going to tell you was I think you'd be surprised by some of the technology that a lot of these private credit firms have right now, that these actually could be tracked more than you think they probably could be. So, we'd love to show you some of the technology that we've seen that's capable to actually track it. And so if you just think about if we sat down with some of the banks that have approached Dan saying that they would like the money, and we have a conversation with those banks that say, look, we have 10, 15, 20 loans that we could make if we have the capital. There's the technology capability to follow that dollar actually into the borrower and see how well the borrower pays back. And then the treasurer is correct. We would have to make some economic assumptions. If they hire 3 or 4 people at a certain rate, there could be economic implications that we could underwrite pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah, that's.
Okay.
I'm not.
Yeah,
And
Sorry, go
given the bank's choice between taking this money and subjecting themselves to that type of a process, I'll be honest, banks are doing pretty good right now. I mean, so
Yeah, Howard, I think it's pretty hard to tell. We actually had a bank reach out to us with a pretty impressive presentation. And what I would say to you is I think some of these banks, it appears to us that even with a little bit of this potential oversight, and they actually prove that they actually can deliver on loans and impacting their community, I feel like the sentiment from the treasurer is like, we want to do all we can to impact the growth of the Utah economy. And I personally believe that some of these banks are going to prove their merit, that they actually can get money out there, track the money, service the loans, and actually grow the economy. So I don't know these guys personally, but it appears like some of them might be pretty eager to prove their merit.
yeah, I have no doubt it'll happen. I have no doubt. I mean, I think the Chicago year report is spot on. There's no question it's better to put this money back into our economy, and the banks are the safest way to do it. But the bankers I'm talking to, I just went through a 2-year study with them on the housing building initiative, and nobody took the money. So it's like,
Well, but Howard, I think it's a completely different. It's a completely different structure because the way when you're talking about lending money to a home builder, that's a completely different structure from a bank than anything else. And you are correct. That's a much more complicated process than what we were actually charged to underwrite. Significantly more complicated process. But again, I do think that's, and I could be wrong, but it appears like some of these smaller banks that are aggressive, and I was pretty impressed with these guys that reach out to us and send us a presentation. I think some of these guys could prove that, hey, we have done the underwriting of local businesses that could use capital. We just don't have the balance sheet to make the loan to them. I think the more information we get around that, the more informed we will be to make this thing a tremendous success for the state of Utah.
well, we could do that with any dollar then, couldn't we? We don't have to use these dollars to prove the model.
We could use your balance sheet, Howard.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not averse to this. I'm just, who's going to do it? It sounds, I mean, that doesn't sound like this is an auditor function or a Department of Financial Institution function. And maybe we just have to, at the end of the trial, retain somebody, i.e. Turo or somebody, and look at the data, whether it's micro or macro, whatever the data has. And I'm totally confident what it's going to say. The question is it going to be sufficient to get a positive fiscal note when we say these funds need to be reinvested in Utah? Because right now we're going to get a negative fiscal note. because all they're going to look at is the differential in the rates. And ideally, we can do enough of analysis, Marlo, to where we can go back to the legislature and say, no, you have to score this because we've tracked this and we know the yield is going to go to 10, 11, 12. There should be a fiscal note for not deploying it in Utah. Sorry.
Sounds like the sentence in question in this recommendation was surrounding the FTE. Is there any adjustments we need to make to that sentence, or I guess anything else in this recommendation to make any or all of you more comfortable?
So, Brittany, we have language that is directly out of GASB, which most of these entities would have to report the governmental accounting standards on what the definition of an independent person would be, that we could take either the one dedicated, and I don't know that it has to be full-time equivalent but that gives you a benchmark for how much money you're talking, but we could also add the language that defines an independent entity for oversight, whether that be through whoever that is, because those definitions would then qualify if it stays, and we can leave the actual decision for who that oversight is to the legislature, because we would like them to take some responsibility here. So, but we can just leave it as the legal language defining an independent entity.
Let me take another stab at it. Maybe the issue is the next sentence where it says the pilot's purpose is to determine whether new deposits actually generate new Utah loans. That's one thing. And I think the Department of Financial Institutions can play a role in that with call report data and maybe some other supplemental reporting. But in terms of deposits and loans, that's actually fairly easy. The next piece is what I'm struggling with, and what I think we're struggling with, whether those loans produced observable economic benefits and whether any such benefits exceed the foregone yield. So then that's where you're talking about proving out the model in the Turo report. So I think maybe if we split these things into two pieces and say, okay, first of all, we want to make sure that these deposits turn into Utah loans. And then at the end of the study, we are going to do some kind of an analysis that determines whether or not that generated the yield we anticipated per the report. And we just say that they're going to need to fund that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Yeah.
It does make sense to me as long as we leave it as an independent evaluator. So that has to be someone that wasn't involved in the pilot at all, so that we are sure that the assessment of the impact is an independent review and an independent determination of the impact.
And Mark, wouldn't you come back and do that?
I think we may have dropped him.
Well, it could be somebody.
I think that was his answer, Brittany. I'm out. I'm kidding.
I'm done.
Well, we just go out to RFP and has somebody. I mean, ideally it would be a Turo, because then he could integrate some of this stuff at the beginning of the pilot, so that he could draw on the data for the economic analysis.
Yeah, no, I agree. They would make the most sense, I think.
But if you can get something in there along those lines, I mean,
Well, knowing Mark, I think that's going to have to be greater than one FTE. But other than that, I think we're fine. But he's not here to defend himself. So
yeah, he's on my screen.
Oh, is he?
You can speak up anytime, Mark. Go ahead.
I'm still not seeing him.
Yeah, I don't see him up there. Okay,
Okay, I'll wordsmith that. And then again, with all of these changes that we're discussing, I'll incorporate them and then send this out a final time. Hopefully we'll be able to vote on this now, just pending the edits. So then number 6 is continuing monitoring reserve trends and engaging public entities on persistent growth. And so maybe this is one we modify to include the tax proposal if you all are comfortable with including that.
So I was going to comment earlier. I don't want everyone to get too anxious about my statement over returning to pre-COVID levels. I would adjust those for inflation, but I do think that what we're going to see with the transparency of what's out there and the ability to compare across similar government types, that will hold people more accountable to where their balances are. But I do think we're going to see a correction over time as they go back to those levels. So that was more just comment, not necessarily a change, just to make sure that no one thinks that I do realize we've gone through an inflationary period and we're not going to go back to pre-COVID deposit numbers
nominal, yeah.
Without inflation adjustment.
Yeah, and they're highlighted, also population growth.
Yeah.
And that was what I was going to echo too, is that in 2021, a lot of cities saw some of their highest growth periods ever. So impact fees and everything collected from that year may have yet to be spent because they've got a period of time still to spend those. It's closing soon, but those would be part of those deposits as well.
Yeah.
Just another way to say the same thing, I guess.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
So any concerns, I guess, with this point, and then any more feedback on incorporating either 7th or adjusting number 6 to incorporate the change to the property tax rate calculation.
I'm curious if we could say, as a 7th item, investigating the impacts of including revenue made from these in the calculation of the certified rate for property taxes. That way, it's not a adopt a bill and do this, but like let's look at it and see what the impact would be. Is that something people would be comfortable with, or am I still going too far?
I'm comfortable with studying it. I like to study everything. All right, I'll stop.
Maybe the
I
way
like that.
Oh, who was that? Was that
That's I like that approach on that recommendation.
that's
But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. If you're going to say something contrary, you're welcome to feel that way.
when the guy with the vote speaks, we listen, Senator.
I'm trying to not say much, but I do. Go ahead, please.
Well, I think maybe one way to frame it, Billy, would be to say, in absence of specific recommendations as to
Policy.
the propriety of reserve levels, because I don't think we want to opine. We haven't done enough research to opine on anyone's reserve levels. So in the absence of any recommendations regarding the propriety of reserve levels, the legislature may want to consider this policy of tying the yields of reserves to the certified property tax rate calculations to ensure that the benefits of these reserves inure to the taxpayer.
I can't spell all those words, Howard, so I'm hoping Brittany can.
I wrote that down. But that effect of recommending that the legislature investigate this further, consider a policy to this effect.
What was, let's see, Paul, you had mentioned something about the reserves growing as a result of, what was it? Impact.
Population.
Do we have that in here?
We don't.
So that's on page 14.
Yeah. So I mean, and I can't give you data. I just know from experience that at least the city that I was managing at the time in 2021 had the highest number of building permits pulled in its history in a single year. And so you had that rebound from
Close comment on that in the survey.
Yeah. So that's going to show up in our restricted reserves that are there, but it would be reflected in the full balance as they wait for an appropriate project, because those impact fees are restricted for specific use based on the impact of the development. So I think that's one of the corrections that we will see over time.
Yeah. As those
Just,
projects get allocated in the budget and those expenditures get realized for projects, that will normalize that.
we won't have the data for it, but we do have an imperfect one, which is the housing units. So we have both population and housing unit changes, which would cover a lot of those kind of like new home builds, because that's how they actually forecast and estimate them. And that is in, I think it's in the report.
Yeah, it is actually. It does talk about that. So.
Where's the part that talks about?
Maybe before we go to that, is there anything else on the recommendations that needs to be adjusted, or any more conversation around the recommendations? Any consternation from anybody regarding any of these recommendations?
Let's see, okay, so we do talk about the pilot. Number 5. Does it talk about the rate?
The recommendation does not, so that would have to be worked out in the legislative process.
Right. So we won't get into that specificity here, right? Okay.
So I'm going to go back to the sentence that Howard had to strike on number 2. So Jason reminds me, while we've been on mute, that the reason it came to the state auditor's office is because in local government reporting, state finance doesn't have the oversight over local governments the way the state auditor does in their financial reporting. So they were struggling to get the information from local entities, and we have the ability to withhold their disbursement of funds. We don't do it often, but we do have the ability to hold funds. So we had more power in order to collect the data and ensure its ability. So that may be one more reason to why that line is there. So just my thought. You.
Okay. All right, anything else on?
I think we need to get a vote on the recommendations.
Okay.
Noting that we'll make a couple of the revisions that we discussed, work with task force members to ensure that they're comfortable.
Okay, so do we do that as a package or separate?
I think it would be good to have a vote.
Okay, so then we have issues with voting on the recommendations as a package as we have discussed, or is there a preference for breaking them out one by one? Hearing none, we will vote on a package. And then if there are issues, we will take that under consideration. With that, all right. So I will entertain a motion.
So
I would
moved.
make a motion to accept the recommendations as a group from the report.
Great. And the second from Billy, is that right?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion?
Can I just,
Please.
I'm glad we went through these recommendations and I'll support the motion on the recommendations, but there's stuff in this report that I have problems with. So rather than not bore everybody through here, I guess I don't know how to separate my tentative support of the recommendations from some of the things in the report.
Honestly,
think
Howard,
maybe-
I felt the same way about it, and I figured that because you and I tend to be on different sides on this, that we somehow landed in the middle because you were unhappy and so was I. But I think I can amend my motion to say we have support of the recommendations as a whole and not with the individual items within the report or the individual findings within the report.
But not every item in the report.
And I think that right before so right here in the recommendations section, I can say that the task force has voted on the below recommendations, although not all task force members agree with everything in the report as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the general concept, Howard, and there, as I mentioned earlier, these are general recommendations. We don't have specific policy that has been articulated, and as things become finally polished, certainly there will be discussion and comments to make sure it's done properly. So as a broad brush and moving ahead from a spirit of studying things and moving ahead, I think I'm fine with that, but I feel similar to what Howard has expressed.
I'll add in there to that effect too, LeGrand.
Yeah.
I support these recommendations. However, not everything in the report is supported by all task force members. And as policy develops, we'd encourage continued engagement with the entities affected. And
that's fine.
Allowing them to provide feedback. Yeah.
That would be the intent. I think that's good to have it stated the way you have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
And I'll just say to you, Brittany, I do recognize a lot of the changes you made, and I appreciate what you did there. So there's just some others that I didn't see before I even wrote my comments that I've come upon. So I just, rather than they're general, but I appreciate your response to my comments.
Okay. All right, with that, all in favor of the motion as discussed, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Let's better clarify that nobody abstained.
And there was no abstention
from those present.
From those present, exactly. So let's see. We've got, do you have everybody who's on?
I'll assume as an advisory member, I was not voting.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right.
And Marlo, I mean, that's based upon the discussion we've had. I haven't seen it, what Brittany's done with those so I'd like to see what the recommendations look like after our conversation.
Yep.
I'm muted.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you. Anything else that anybody would like to discuss? If not, thank you, everyone. I'm giving you 15 minutes back. Senator Stratton, do you have something?
Again, an expression of gratitude and look forward to the fruits of this and the ongoing blessing of the expertise that this brain trust brings. Thank you.
Brittany, did I miss something?
I think that it might be good to set a deadline for final feedback, noting that we're going to submit this.
You have 1 hour. No, I'm just kidding.
I have to make some changes as well.
Yeah. So when would you like?
So on this latest iteration, not including the changes that we've discussed, if you send them I mean, as soon as possible, maybe by no later than noon tomorrow, and then I'll shoot for that time frame to make these changes, and then any final edits. I don't know what's reasonable. Midday. I mean, we need to send this out by end of day on Friday. So earlier in the day, Friday would be ideal. Midday Friday, early Friday, 10 a.m. Friday.
10 a.m. Friday. Does that work for everybody? So, with this iteration, it is noon tomorrow,
Mhm.
and then the final iteration, 10 a.m. Friday. Anybody have issues? Okay, thank you. Is that it? Am I missing anything? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, are you still?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
And I'll second.
thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thanks,
And
everyone.
that motion passed unanimously. There were no nays. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great evening. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
See ya.